everybody. I hope everybody's doing well today. I've got my little prop here, my little basket, and I've got my little colorful picture back here. But today I'm going to read you a story. I remember when I was in Sunday school and I learned this story, I was like so afraid of the little basket. But let me read you the story. This is called Miriam and Moses. Remember I told you that these stories come right out of the Bible, but they are written in words that children can understand. And this is retold by an author named Sarah Toast. Jochebed came into the house after a day of hard work in the fields. Her daughter Miriam poured her a glass of sweetened water. Jochebed's young son Aaron played at her feet. Miriam could tell that something was troubling her mother. Her mother looked at her and said, "I have terrible news. It is not enough that Pharaoh has turned us into slaves and made our days miserable. Though we are treated harshly, we continue to grow in size and strength, so Pharaoh is afraid of us, afraid that we will rise up against him or that we will help the enemy that tries to conquer him." Pharaoh was a very, very jealous king. He felt like if a group of people were getting too big or too strong, he wanted to wipe them out. "But how could Pharaoh treat us so badly?" Miriam asked her mother. "You haven't heard it all," she said. "There is worse to come, my child," said her mother. "Pharaoh has ordered the Israelite nurses to kill all the baby boys born to us." "Oh, that is dreadful, Mother," Miriam exclaimed. "What if our new baby is a boy?" "She's expecting a baby. God will help us," she said. And as the weeks passed, Jochebed brought news from the field that all new Israelite baby boys were well after all. The nurses refused to do as Pharaoh ordered. Perhaps we do not need to worry. Later, though, Miriam went down to the well where her mother drew water for their households, and she exchanged news. A kind woman helped Miriam pull up the heavy pail from the well. The woman leaned close to Miriam and quietly told her something. When Miriam got home, she sadly told her mother what the woman at the well had said. "Pharaoh is very angry that his orders were not obeyed by the nurses. Now he has ordered all Egyptians to throw every Israelite baby boy into the Nile River." A few days later, Jochebed called Miriam to her side. "Miriam," said Jochebed, "it is time to get the nurse to help me with the new baby, but be very, very careful not to let anyone else know." Now, back in those days, they didn't go to the hospitals to have their babies. When it was time for the mama to have the baby, she would send for a nurse. It's sort of like a midwife, and the nurse would come and help bring the baby into the world. So Miriam already knows the bad news that they want to kill all the baby boys. So maybe in her mind she was hoping for a little sister. But let's see what happens. Soon Miriam was back with the nurse. Miriam left the nurse with her mother, and she took Aaron down to the river. "I'll show you how to make a little raft of reeds to float on the Nile," said Miriam to Aaron. Miriam took care of Aaron at the river all afternoon. When Miriam brought Aaron back home at dinner time, there was a new baby in the house. "Meet your new baby brother," said Jochebed happily. "He is such a beautiful baby," said Miriam, and then she kissed him on the forehead. "We must hide him from sight," said Jochebed. "I will help you," said Miriam. For 3 long months, the family took care of the little baby boy without the Egyptians knowing about him. I've often wondered, how can you hide a baby for 3 months? I like to think that maybe God was with that family and kept the baby safe. But when the Egyptians kept making their sweeping searches of the Israelite homes and their yards, Jochebed hid her little baby in a basket. I brought this because this was probably about the size of the basket that her little baby was able to fit into. So she would hide him from the Egyptians in that basket. One day, Miriam went to the river's edge to gather reeds to make baskets. Suddenly, Pharaoh's beautiful daughter came to the river with her servants. "I have seen that princess here before," thought Miriam. "I must remember what day she comes to the river to bathe." So remember, back in those days, they didn't have fancy bathrooms and showers, so when they got ready to bathe, they would go down to the river and bathe down there. One morning, Joabed said, "I don't think we can hide this baby much longer." "Do not worry," Miriam said, "for I have a plan." So Miriam helped her mother make a special basket in the shape of a little boat. Before the full light, Miriam and her mother quietly took the baby in the basket to the place by the riverbed where Pharaoh's daughter bathed. There, the Israelite mother and daughter set the basket in the thick reeds. The basket bobbed gently on the water, lulling the baby to sleep. Remember what reeds are? They're like big bushes that are sticking up. So they took the basket and they put them down in those reeds, and the basket was going to float in there. Joabed went back home to wait. That's not all she did, though. She went back home to wait and pray. She got on her knees and she prayed to the Lord to protect her little baby boy. Miriam, though, stayed hidden in the tall reeds and the grasses. Why do you think Miriam might have been staying in the looking over? Did you say she wanted to see what happened and she wanted to watch and make sure nothing happened to the baby? That's what I think. So after some time passed, Miriam began to worry that the princess was not going to come to the river's edge that day. So there she is looking. She's making the basket, she had a plan for her baby brother, didn't she? Suddenly, Miriam heard the clatter of the princess and her servants. Just as the princess was about to step into the water, her gaze, that means her eyes, settled on the beautiful little basket bobbing in the reeds. "Bring me that little boat-shaped basket," she said to her handmaid. That means like her helper, her servant. So the handmaid waded into the reeds and returned with the basket. As she set it on the ground at the prince's feet, soft sounds were heard from inside. "It's a baby," said the princess. "It's an Israelite baby." "How can we take care of this little child?" the princess asked her handmaid. "The poor little child must be so very hungry." So Miriam thought the princess must have a good and a kind heart. So she quietly made her way out of the reeds. Then she bravely asked the princess, "Shall I go and find an Israelite to nurse and take care of this baby for you?" The princess smiled at Miriam. "Child, if you can bring such a woman to me, I will pay her to care for this baby until it is weaned." So in other words, she wants somebody that has milk to be able to nurse the baby. So let's see what happens. So Miriam ran home to tell her mother the good news. Then Miriam and her mother returned to the riverbank as fast as they could. Joabed saw that the princess had her baby. She could tell that the princess did indeed have a very kind heart. "I will pay you to care for this baby until he is weaned," said the princess. "Then I'm going to raise him as my own child. He will be a prince of Egypt." Joabed was so happy. "His name shall be called Moses," said the princess. "It means that he was drawn out of the water." Then the princess gave Joabed a ring to show to any Egyptian who tried to take the baby. Joabed and Miriam were filled with hope and happiness. Miriam hugged Moses tightly and thanked God for protecting her little brother. So they had a plan. See, there's the little reed she put him in. And then she is holding her baby. And she got a special ring, so when the Egyptians were coming to kill the baby, she could just show the ring and they would leave that baby alone. Something tells me that God may have a plan for this baby whose name was Moses. So when I see you next time, we're going to learn about Moses and the Pharaoh. I hope you enjoyed it. Next time you see a basket like this, remember the story. That little baby Moses was put in a basket like this and put in the weeds for somebody to protect. So that's a good way to remember the story. Hope you have a good day. Bye.